All right, so we're looking at another poem, another sonnet by Shakespeare, and it's entitled That Time of Year. A couple of points about it before we read it. First of all, it's divided into three parts, okay, each of the four lines, quatrains 4, 8, 12. All right, and then the remaining lines sum it up. But the beginning talks about the season of winter. The second, about the day, kind of, from dawn to dusk. All right. And the third talks about a fire. And in the poem, it's a love sonnet. He's dedicating his thoughts to his loved one, but it's somewhat reflective because he's talking about her reaction to his death. Okay, he's not talking about his own reaction to her death, but that he will die soon, because of his age, that time of year, and how she will react to that. And that's in the rhyming couplet in the end. All right, so that might not be too clear at this point, what I just said, but hopefully, after I read it and talk about it a little bit, it might become clearer. Okay, so let's look at it. That time of year thou may in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. Second image. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset faded in the west, which by and by black night doth seal away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire. This is the third one now, sorry. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. Three images. Rhyming couplet. This thou perceives, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. And that word leave could also be substituted for lose. To love that well which thou must lose ere long. All right. But all right, so it's all metaphorical, obviously. All right, it's all symbols. He's talking about his state or stage of life that, he's in advanced years. And he's talking about, the relationship that he had with her. I'm saying her, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be a man, but his loved one, okay? His beloved. And that is coming to a close. And it's coming to a close in three different images. He uses three different images to suggest how that is coming to a close, the relationship between the two. And he concludes by saying that when we know we're going to lose something very precious and endearing to us, we treasure it all the more, prior to losing it, right? So that's really what the poem is about. But let me read it again and then do a little bit of analysis and talk about some of the words. All right, first of all, diction. All right, now diction is very important in poetry, and what it is it's not the way you speak, person's diction. It is the the word choice that the poet has selected to convey like his image, like if he wanted to convey an imagery of war, he would have words like defeat, retreat, shoulder, um, words that are military in a sense, like shouldering a rifle. All right, we saw that in Frost's poem in Winter in the Woods Alone, against. All right, against is another word that would convey the idea of opposition, fighting. All right, so in this poem, he wants to convey the idea of aged, okay, person's aged. And he does in the first four lines, first quatrain, by using a tree in the winter. Well, actually, it's late autumn, prior to winter, when the birds have fled, they've gone south, the branches are bare, the leaves are gone, okay, or if there are any, just a few. And he calls the birds choirs because lately they had been singing in the trees and they're gone. So they're bare ruined choirs. And that's the first image. And the second image of the day, he talks about twilight, sunset fading in the west when the sun goes down, black night, take away that second self, seals up all in rest. All those words. That's what I mean by diction now, because those words convey the idea of oncoming darkness until it is totally enveloped in pure darkness and there's nothing there, and that would, of course, be death, all right? Person's life. So that's the second image. And then the third image is fire. And he's speaking about the ashes and expire, deathbed, consumed. All right, so those images, those words, they're concrete words that you might say are associated with a dying fire. All right, and that's diction. So that's what we mean by diction. So diction appears in all three stanzas, those three quatrains, that imbues the entire poem with loss, loss of a season, loss of a day, and in the end, loss of the person's life, all right? And that's why he says, leave long. He's going to be dying, and she's going to be losing him. But don't forget, the other point that I made is that he's talking about her reaction to his death, not his reaction, her reaction. He said, he's taking the liberty of saying about her. He's making judgments or conclusions about her. He says, "This thou look at the second to last line. This thou perceives, like that's what you see, which makes your love more strong." How does he know that? Well, he's making that judgment. Okay, that you will love more strongly, that well, which you must lose. Leave long. All right, so that's what the poem is about. I'll read it again, and then we'll look at the analysis, okay, that I wrote. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset faded in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, that second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, notice the image of fire, ashes, as the deathbed whereon it must expire. consumed with that which it was nourished by. In other words, the flames. All right, that would be his earlier, younger years, his passion, nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes your love more strong to love that well which thou must leave ere long. All right, now the analysis. I already talked about diction, so I'll skip the first paragraph. One word the second paragraph too. Okay, so let's go right to the third paragraph here. That time of year is a monologue in which the narrator is addressing his beloved, telling her that she may see in him each of these images. In the first line, he says, "Thou mayest in me behold," and in the fifth line, "In me thou seest," and in the ninth line, he says, "Thou seest again." Notice that these lines constitute three different quatrains. That would be 4 lines of verse, and that the first and the fifth and ninth lines are the first lines of each of those quatrains. All right, I shouldn't even mention that. Shakespeare has divided his details into these 3 units. Each of them, narrator is telling his beloved that she might find these characteristics within him. And what are the images? Okay, that's I already talked about. The first quatrain, that time of year, which we understand to be early winter, when the trees, stripped of the leaves, now appear as bare branches with the absence of small chirping birds. Shakespeare creates beautiful imagery with such details as the shivering boughs, which are said to shake against the cold, and the absence of the birds, the bare, ruined choirs. And where he says lately, we might say lately they were singing, he says where late the sweet birds sang. So just to, see that word late means lately, recently. This word carries a further connotation, though, of someone deceased. We speak of people, the late so-and-so, okay? We use it in reference to that person having died. Hence, the first quatrain of the 4 lines of the poem, the narrator tells his beloved that she might see in his aged features a similarity to the season of winter when all was lifeless and cold. He's no longer young and spry and spirited, Time has taken its toll. His limbs are enfeebled and frail. His hair is thin, few or none. He's talking about the leaves. That would be his hair is thin or gone entirely. His voice is weak and tremulous now. That time of year is his golden years, his autumn years, not golden years. He's going into the autumn of his life, or later than that, okay? The second quatrain conjures a new image, and that of approaching night. The narrator tells his beloved that she might see in him the features associated with the end of a day when the sun has already sunken in the west, and the afterglow will soon give way to entire darkness, sealing the world in sleep. That's second self. That's what sleep is, okay? That might be from Macbeth. These 4 lines, like the previous quatrain, convey the idea of approaching death through Shakespeare's diction word choice. Consider his words: twilight, sunset, faded, west, black night, take away, that second self, seals up, casket is sealed, and rest. And then the third quatrain, a new image, that of dying fire. Like the first 2 quatrains, the narrator tells his beloved that she might compare his aged state of life to the remains of something that had an existence but is now in its last stage. This time the image is that of a smoldering fire. Like the bare ruined choirs that no longer exist and are appropriately called ruined, the fire is referred to as the glowing, which almost has a more endearing image, because his heart is still glowing with love. as in the afterglow of day, the afterglow. So he is now lying on the ashes of his youth, okay? And he's being consumed by that which the fire, was nourished by, all right? His life and his love for her. Now it's becoming all consuming. And the reference to the deathbed further intensifies the theme of dying or fading out of existence. The narrator tells his beloved that he, like the dying embers, which he calls the ashes of his youth, is now being consumed by the blaze of his intensity of life. His fire is now burning itself out. He has served to nourish him. It has served to nourish him as a life force, and might be seen in the intensity of his love for her. But now that fire must consume itself in its own ashes and expire. So the details in this quatrain continue this concept of dying, which Shakespeare has sustained in the first two quatrains. Shakespeare's choice of such words as glowing, ashes, doth lie, deathbed, expire, and consume all further his dominant theme of dying and approaching death. The final rhyming couplet brings the sonnet to a philosophical conclusion. All that has been presented in the first quatrains now allows for a kind of summary statement. In this sonnet, the narrator is saying that the intensity of one's love is that much stronger when one is confronted with the knowledge that he will soon be losing that which he has always enjoyed. Okay, and he calls it leaving, but we could also call it losing. In effect, he's saying that he, the narrator, knows that his beloved love for him is most intense at this moment, for she understands that death is at his doorstep. Okay, so he's rather presumptive there, but we'll go along with it. All right, so this is the poem one last time with all those ideas addressed to his beloved. That time of year thou may in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away. That's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long.